I've got an idea.
Okay. Let's hear. I want to hear border ideas.
Hole in the pants. We've got a hole in our pants. Let's get casting.
Okay.
I've got I dropped it last week, and I wanted to re-bring it up. You've mentioned a few times how, not everybody's going to be happy about an immigration scenario. Not everybody's going to be about a fix, or at least some kind of reform, right? So I'm going to blow it out there a little bit, and then let's see what your thoughts are on it. It appears to me that our border has never really been, in a way, addressed the way we've dealt with, let's say, our tax code, or let's say we've dealt with, other governmental functions. It's been kind of looked over, not really been. It's been kind of, the hole in the pants has been there probably forever, since the founding of this place was a couple hundred years ago, when some change, and we were a bunch of immigrants at the time. So I don't think border was on it was a top of mind to the founding fathers.
It's probably the opposite, right? We were trying to immigrate people to the United States. It was supposed to be a refuge place for people to come from all over. So yeah.
Right. So we still have that historical piece where that we're, kind of a refuge for people that want freedom and want to be able to worship as they please, that was the main driving force for this whole thing. And now here we are, a couple hundred years and some change, a couple 150 years later, and we've got a border problem. And we have a country of our own, and have had one for a long time. But politically, I don't feel like it's been addressed. And you mentioned, it could have been the last pod, it might have been the one before. You mentioned that, your job changes every administration or two, and then also within here and there.
Sure.
Whomever, whatever Arpaio creeps up on you, or whatever else creeps up on you. And so the code, or the way that they deal with immigration, by they meaning immigration services, the process or the law of Arizona, sometimes a law, but it's federal that you're dealing with, but it's however Arizona's doing some once upon a time. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's go. So what could we do to start? And I remember you saying we have to start with who's here.
Yeah, so immigration. So yeah, that's a loaded question. I think you, as you were talking, your focus was on the border, which is an element of immigration.
Right. I was trying to kind of push it and to say back
and the
to
border's
what you
a
were
problem
saying.
Because, and that's what everybody's talking about right now. I think that it's multi-layered is the problem, is that the border is an issue. The border always gets brought up on any type of positive or negative change for immigration. There's always and it needs to be. I'm not arguing against it. There needs to be. Yeah, you're right. We haven't dealt with the border in years. I think the border, as far as this asylum process, which is the main problem that we have right now, was not as big of an issue 15 years ago, let's say. And it's the fault of both of the last presidents. President Trump decided to make a major overhaul in his mind in the enforcement of how he did asylum and the border. When I wouldn't say it was working well, because it wasn't. There was issues that need to be addressed, and especially on the safety part of it, and then the wall or whatever they wanted to do to keep people out. But the asylum place, which is what we're dealing with. Illegal immigration, we got to figure it out, right? That's a security issue, not an immigration issue, in my opinion.
Right.
But allowing people to apply for benefits and for the border, a lot of times it's asylum. President Trump came and said, I don't like the way asylum is being used, which I was in the trenches. I was like, I take 2 or 3 asylum cases a year. It's a very minimal amount of cases that I take. And that was pretty much across the board. And so I don't think that the communities outside of the United States, Central America, Mexico, wherever else, were really using the asylum process like they are now. But Trump came in and said, hey, I want this, cleaned up. And so I'm going to keep people in Mexico. And he had this arrangement with Mexico that they were going to keep them until they had their credible fear interviews. And I think, in some ways it worked to stem the asylum abuse. But what it did was just created a humanitarian crisis in Mexico, which then they gave up on. And then we had all of our, liberal sides of things coming out saying we've now created an international incident because we've got hundreds of thousands of people at the border that
a
or
traffic
thousands that are just crawling on bridges and whatever else. And then the narcos are taking advantage of that because they're sneaking people in through all the chaos. So it caused an issue, whether Trump would like to admit it or not to say that he was wrong, but it was a new policy that every time you implement something new, there's going to be hiccups. By the time President Biden takes over and this has taken place, instead of kind of saying, okay, we need to calm this down, we need to make some small tweaks to this, he blows it all up, right? And he takes out the entire policy and says, we're not even going to do anything. We're just going to let you be paroled in as long as you have some semblance of a credible fear. You're just going to be allowed into the country. So now we have this huge influx of people that hear in their communities, hey, the United States has got an open border, and they come in and now we've got, and the problem is some of these programs are programs where they'll let them come in for a year, but they have zero plan after that year. I mean, I'm dealing with people all the time that were like, yeah, and their perception is they've won an asylum claim because they've been given a stamp in their passport that says you're good here for the next year and you can work and whatever else. Oh, I won my asylum claim. And I look at it when they come into the office and I'm like, no, all they let you do is come into the United States and work for a year, but there's no plan for extending that year. So all these people after a year
are just in the shadows,
back again.
Back in the shadows.
Or they have to apply for asylum affirmatively and eventually maybe they'll have a court case. And I think that's what the government's hope is. But I have people coming into my office all the time that didn't understand that. And they're like 2 weeks away from their deadline of filing an asylum because an asylum claim has to be filed within 1 year. And I'm like, I don't have enough time to do this. Like, why did you wait so long? I didn't know I was supposed to do it. They gave me a permit for a year. So it's not being explained well to these people.
Right.
So there's a problem. The asylum program is a problem. I wish that's a policy that I don't know how to solve. There's got to be something that's done. I don't have a ton of suggestions other than letting people into the country without doing the vetting that is proper and necessary is not the way to do it. I think Trump was onto something. I think it didn't get implemented in the way that he probably thought it was going to, or maybe he didn't care. It did create quite a problem, and it was going to create security issues for the United States with pounding people at the border and just having them sleep in tents at the border.
The one thing I think it did is I think it slowed the roll.
It slowed the excitement of asylum, which, like I said, that was on the right track. We were on the right track. I don't even know if it needed to be messed with in the first place. The security part of it did.
Yeah.
The curbing the illegal immigration, I don't know why Trump's policymakers thought that asylum was such an issue that they needed to tackle. I think the security part of it was.
Yeah.
I don't think that the asylum was being abused as much as their policy and their talking heads thought it was.
I think you've got one is more sellable than the other. So, for example, I don't know why security is less sellable.
Yeah, I don't either.
But it just seems like, asylum is some sort of word out there that is, doesn't really have a punch to it. Asylum, we're going to focus on it. It almost goes under the radar. Like that's what we're focusing on is asylum. They don't even have to say it. They just say we're building this wall, and blah, 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 and they're going to stay in Mexico until they go through the proper process and all that. I've got an idea.
Okay. Let's hear. I want to hear border ideas. I got other ideas for what we can do inside the country and maybe to even demotivate people.
I'm trying to hit a global idea wherein it works on both ends. I don't know. We'll see. So we're not politicians, so this probably won't put me in the driver's seat of any type of election anytime soon. But what I think is we have millions upon millions of people here illegally. Okay, we can all admit that. Okay. After that, we got to figure out, all right, they're here. Hole in the pants. We've got a hole in our pants. There's no going back.
Yeah.
It's there. We've got a bucket ton of folks crossing. We've got all sorts of not very good people facilitating that.
Sure. Yeah.
We call them coyotes. We call them traffickers. And there's a whole lot of unspeakable stuff that's going on in this trafficking ring. So in 40, 30? I don't know. Organized crime was really a strong thing here in the United States till about 1985, till about, Doc Brown came on board with Back to the Future. It seemed like it started to become less of a thing.
Rudy Giuliani in New York, right?
Yeah. And so he cleaned up the families and so on and so forth. But that's never happened in Mexico. The cartels are still alive, well, and thriving. If we want to think that they're battling each other, it might happen from time to time, but their explosions are within. As far as they're fighting and they're, getting ugly, it's usually within the organization, not really one
Outside.
against the other. They usually work together, actually. It's doing the criminal stuff for so long, you realize there's really no colors. They might go by different names here and there, but they're basically working with each other, whomever is helping whomever out. Anyway, off topic. So we got that crossing. So there's that ugly coming across the border. And then there's the ugly of what do we do with all these folks that are illegal that are here? Some would say that they've been invited by an administration.
Right now, that's the case. That hasn't been the case in any years past.
I've never seen that
first
before.
Time.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this
At least the
before
first time
since
in my career.
Right. I mean, we've been around a long time, but the reality is rewinding history, it's never been this big a problem. Okay. I think that the average price tag of somebody paying a coyote, they're paying a trafficker, they're paying the cartel, they're paying whomever, has gone up. Boy, inflation apparently affects them too. Who knew?
More expensive to walk across the border, apparently.
Yeah. So I don't understand why they use anybody, but they still do. And it's about around $3,000. And that's on the cheap. That's kind of an average, whatever. And so let's go 3, could be 4, whatever. For the case of this conversation, let's have everybody here that has no documents that qualifies. There is zero law enforcement to this approach, meaning they go in and say, here's my Christian name, here's who I am, to a government building, wherein if they say you wouldn't qualify, they can walk right out of the government building, okay? But they can go in and find out if they qualify. And they pay something. Let's say they pay $1,500, right? Each of them pay $1,500. They would do it in a hot minute. We both know this. To get a social security number to where we can identify who they are.
And a work permit.
A work permit. And they can renew that for X amount of dollars. Every proof of employment, stay out of trouble type thing, yada, yada, yada. The same kind of general ideas that we have with the green. And the folks that are coming over, same thing. Now, what number do we cap it at? We both know 175,000 isn't a good number. Is there a cap? I don't know. I think that's something to kind of ping pong back and forth, because they seem to regulate themselves once we're kind of a little bit crowded work-wise. They don't come. Or if our economy blows up, they take off and go back home from whatever home is. And so to me, that seems to be a start. Let's have them come in. We know who they are. They want to be known too. They want to be able to drive a car with a valid driver's license. They want to be able to work without looking over their shoulder. So, okay, that part is the willingness on one end is there. The procedure on the other end. Now, obviously, I'm going real general with all this stuff, but I don't want a lot of moving parts to it, because the more moving parts you slide in, the bigger the book gets.
Yeah.
Your code continues to grow and grow and grow and grow. And, the criminal code continues to grow and grow and grow. And I don't see why exactly it needs to have these footnotes other than for people like you that really like to see the footnote. We both know you love yourself a footnote.
Yeah, love the footnotes.
Well, I mean, look, we've had some good success with your footnotes, man.
No, and I think you're onto something a little bit. And it was what you're proposing is something kind of similar to what's already been tried to be implemented under President Obama's administration. So There was a program called DAPA, is what we called it. And we have DACA right now, but it was deferred action for parents of childhood arrivals. So basically, if you had established a certain amount of time here in the United States, you had children born here in the United States, and you passed a background check of some kind of criminal history, that would happen, that you would get something similar to DACA. You would get a work permit, basically. You didn't, go down to the office, but you basically turned an application into the office, and then eventually you do fingerprints at that office and whatever. Right. So it's similar to what you're saying. Texas immediately sued on that. Texas has been the driving force on DACA not getting its permanent status as well. And that program was implemented. Well, the program was announced, but never implemented. I was ready to legalize millions of people at that point. I mean, I had software going on. I've spent money trying to centralize it so we could take advantage of that, because there was going to be a lot of people, and we were not going to be able to handle the work. But it didn't happen. So I do agree. We've got to. There's simple solutions that can be made to the problems here in the United States. So one is we have zero motivation, or we've given zero motivation to people to wait outside the United States under the channels that we have right now.
Right.
And what I mean by that is that basically you've got two ways to immigrate to the United States in general terms. There's some ancillary ones, like, your all-star professional athletes or something like that. But in general,
that one
run-of-the-mill guy.
The soccer player, what's he, Messi, whatever.
Lionel Messi.
Yeah. He's doing he's doing pretty well over here on that one. $1 billion.
Yeah. So we've got some visas like that. Apart from that, you've got family immigration and you have employment immigration, right? Those are our two categories. On the family side, to give it perspective so people understand what's happening with the immigration system, if you were being petitioned, let's say, and here's a situation I had, just a little bit ago, you've got a parent that's somehow, let's say they got adjusted through the amnesty program. Dad came up here, worked in the agriculture in the 80s, got his green card, became a citizen. But mom stayed back in Mexico, had a kid, then came here, joined, had 4 other kids. So all your brothers and sisters are citizens, but you're the one lone, you're the oldest kid. You got brought here as a child. Dad's now become a citizen. Mom's become a citizen. Dad goes to petition you. You're an adult now. You're 22 years old, let's say. You have no family in Mexico. You are in a priority date preference category for a visa. Basically, your wait time for your visa is 30 years. So
that's a problem.
That's a problem, right? So what motivation have we given that particular person to come out of the shadows or to even stay in Mexico? Let's say the argument always is, well, just do it the legal way and we're cool with it. Like that, even the conservatives will say, do legal immigration the way it's set up and we're fine with you coming. The problem I have with that, and the reality is that kid, if you were to tell that 21-year-old, he's not seeing his parents until he's 51 years old. Or at least living in the same community.
And he's never been to Mexico. He doesn't know how to order a taco, and he probably doesn't even know how to sprechen.
Sure. But let's just say he had never been here, and the motivation was, let's do it legally, stay outside the country until you can do it legally. Again, 30 years. On On the employment side, if you've got an Indian that's coming on some of these specialty visas like an H-1B that requires master's degrees or bachelor's degrees and a very high acumen, that visa retrogression that just happened in May put them back 12 years. So now I had people that were literally at the point of getting their green card, had gone through the entire process. The employers had spent tens of thousands of dollars sponsoring them. I went to go file the application, it got pushed back 12 years.
And that just recently happened.
That happened in May. They were already back a few years, but to go back an additional 9 years on top of their 3, there's no motivation for those people to continue to want to immigrate here, or at least to do it legally. Then the motivation is if they've already got anchors here, if they've already got family here, you've motivated them to do it illegally because they lose hope, right? If you have a 30-year wait, they lose hope. So one of the easier solutions that I have to my feelings on immigration is the numerical caps that are set on both employment and family visas are not enough.
Right.
They're just not enough, and they need to be increased, and they need to be processed more efficiently and faster. And you should be able to bring one of your children, because it is a legal process to do it. Should be able to bring an employee that you really identified that fits all the qualifications. You prove to the government there's not U.S. domestic workers that can do it, which is all part of the process.
Right.
This is not taking away a job.
Right.
This is already advertising it and finding out that there is nobody that'll take that job. They should be able to come here in a year or 6 months or something to keep them motivated to do the process legally. If not, they're going to be like, okay, my family's here. I'm not waiting 15 years to get this visa. I'm going up.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that could easily, it's not going to solve the whole process. It's not going to solve the whole problem. We still have to deal with those that are here, because the problem is that those that are here and have been here illegally are not going to qualify for those family benefits.
Right.
Because unless they create some kind of waiver or penalty system where they can get it waived, which they have in certain family categories, but it's very limited. You have to have a U.S. citizen spouse. If you're doing any other process work or other types of family members, you can't get this waiver. So unless they do something like that to forgive it, the 11, 12, 13, and now probably even more because of what's happened at the border of millions of people, you're not going to take care of them. You will start to curb, though, the motivation for Joe, whoever, to come over on just illegally.
For me, it's like this. If we don't start talking about real numbers, this 11 million's been 11 million for 25 years. So it's my freaking butt.
Yeah.
It's got to be between 20 and 30.
And that's the problem, is we don't know.
Right.
We don't know because we keep them in the shadows, because we have no programs.
And
like
we
you
see,
mentioned,
and what we see, you and I both see the folks coming out of the shadows looking for help.
Sure.
I mean, they would sell their souls to have a green card, they're not looking to avoid taxes. Crap, half of them, or more so than half of them, pay them.
Yeah, that's such a misnomer. Like, are there people that don't pay taxes because they're just not sure how that works, or their company's paying them in cash and they don't know? Sure.
Right.
And maybe there's even some nefarious that aren't paying them on purpose.
Sure.
But boy, if you made it a requirement for somebody to get a work permit or a green card, automatic, 100%.
100%.
I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. And H&R Block would be off the charts. I mean, it would be doing a lot of business. They better get those same programs you were looking at getting.
And that's the hard part that I have about the perceptions of immigration. It's, these arguments of stealing American jobs, which may be true. In certain industries, I don't know that it's as true as people think it is, because the jobs that they're taking are usually jobs that we don't want anyway, in general terms.
It's not exactly popular to say that, because there are some people out there that feel like, well, my teenage son, Johnny, could do that, which my teenage son, Johnny, I hate to look at that person in the eye and say, Johnny's worthless.
That can't handle the job. Yeah, I think there's part of it that the labor they can't handle. And I would argue that my companies, in the 20 years that I have done this, have argued heavily that, we advertise the crap out of these jobs. No one shows up. But these guys do. And they do a good job. They're on time. They're there. I'm doing it. So our H-2B process right now, which is these temporary visas where they can come for 9 months, it's usually in the landscape, hospitality, construction industry. When we do them, we have to advertise for jobs. I'm doing a landscaping company right now. They got 150 applications. Every single one of them came from outside the United States.
And
so that's what we're trying to bring anyway. And he keeps calling me. He goes, what happens when people apply for these jobs? I'm like, are really people applying for these jobs? Yeah. Okay. Are they U.S. citizens? No. I'm like, no, that's what we're looking for is U.S. citizens or residents. That's what you need to be worried about. If those people are applying for jobs, this process may not work for you. And the government may deny your application because that's the whole vetting process, is to make sure that there's not people that want this job. And he's like, no, I've had hundreds of applications. They're all from outside the United States. So crazy. Asking if I will bring them on the visa that we're trying to bring the certain person in anyway. And so, yeah, like, look, there's people that will do the jobs that we won't do. And whether that's popular or not, that's the reality. Sorry, I'm in the trenches. You'll have to take my word for it. But here, at least here in Arizona, there are companies that come it's true whether you want to admit it or not. Right. And whether you like it or not, that's just the way our economy's built. That's how capitalistic societies have been built since long before we were here.
Long before we came.
We always have some kind of slave labor, immigrant labor, whatever it is. Luckily, we're not in slave labor right now. We're in immigrant labor. And some people would argue that's a little bit of an indentured servitude. They're okay with it for the most part, as long as you're not treating them badly. They want to do the work and they want to come up, as far as the Mexican community here. But that's the reality of it. That's to try and argue against it, I think, is silly. But we don't have enough numbers to bring these people up to fill the needs, and that's number one.
So I suppose this is getting to the administrative state that we're in. We have a worthless. I don't want to point a finger at your. You can point the finger back.
Sure.
I don't want to point the finger at the immigration process, the courts, the judges, the prosecutors, and so on that exist there. But I want to say they're probably worthless as tits on a lizard. And I'm tired of this judge says this and this judge says that the inconsistency amongst that does happen.
Are you talking about policy or within the immigration court system?
Within the immigration court system, because you get Judge Smith on one particular case, you know that this particular case is going to fly through. Mm. You get Judge Jones. No, it's not.
Yeah, and you're right, and I would be ignorant to know whether that exists, like on your end, on the criminal side of things.
It exists.
And maybe just part of the judicial system in general that you're going to have personalities, and we know it exists on this, even the Supreme Court level. If you're naming a conservative judge, you're going to tend to have conservative decisions, and liberal judge the same way. And I think that, there are personality elements, because there is an element of immigration law that goes into once you get past the requirements. Now, I don't have any judges that are looking at the requirements and say one judge has got an interpretation of the requirements that is different than the other. So you got to get through your threshold. There might be judges that differ in how they interpret criminal law or how they interpret different memos or whatever else, or precedent decisions. But in general, like, we have to have 10 years. We have to have a U.S. citizen kid. We can't have felonies. Those things are covered in the basics. What ends up happening is though, for sure, when I look at something and go, I've got this judge, I've got a better chance on the discretionary side, because this judge will actually hear the emotions and the arguments and the hardship, whereas this judge, unless you've got a kid with Down syndrome, you're not winning the case. So for sure it exists on that side of things. And I'm assuming that's true with all the judicial systems.
What I want to do is take that away some and make it to where, just clean it up and get the numbers to where it looks like they're reasonable given the circumstance that we're in. We're not talking about we're not talking about a couple 100,000 folks. Yeah. We're talking about 20 to 30 million possibly.
No, 65,000 employment visas a year in a category is not nearly enough.
It's not.
You have 30,000 that want to work in the fishing industry alone in Maine that take the majority of those visas.
Isn't that amazing?
That's such a low number given our geographical footprint in the United States and given our population. It's just it's a drop in the bucket. So companies, and that's another part, is that companies tend to be, so you've taken away the incentive for the person that wants to really come here and work and do it legally. You've taken his incentive away because of the mess that it takes to get here and the length of time and the fact that he may not be picked. A lot of these go into a lottery, and it's like 500,000 applicants and 65,000 get get chosen and you just throw your money in and hope to get it. That's not the way to do things, in my opinion. So those people become unmotivated, but the companies themselves here become unmotivated, but they need to continue to function. And so they go, okay, I've tried the legal process of bringing over help legally. My next option is to go illegally, right or wrong. Right. That's what a lot of these companies do, especially your companies that heavily rely on labor that can't seem to find somebody to come in and do the work.
Or show up on time. Or
bankrupt themselves or go,
right. They've got to get the job done. And
so then they end up hiring
there's
somebody
willing
with cash.
Hands, right. There's willing hands to get the job done. What ends up happening, in my opinion, when they can't, now that all the wage workers are going up exponentially. I mean, crap, I just found out yesterday that minimum wage is going up to something around here, 14.
I know it was.
And
the law is that it's going to be creeping up to 15.
I about fell over. I mean, like, you got to be kidding me. I would have done that for the first couple of years practicing law. Yeah. I'm just saying. It probably would have made more money than what I was making.
That's true.
So to me, it's like, okay, what I don't like, Diamondbacks just went to the World Series, right? That's pretty cool. So we had the whole entire postseason where some of those games were here at home. And you're looking at 150 stands at a minimum selling Modelo beer without a license, selling paletas, which is ice cream or hot dogs, doing all flowers, whatever, merchandise of some sort, however they got that merchandise, peanuts even, some popcorn, whatever snacks you got right outside the stadium, right there. And every one of them could have been busted, swept, and arrested for, maybe selling liquor illegally or selling, whatever without a license. Popcorn without a license. I mean, you need to have some sort of licensure for, but anyway, and that's going on. And I look at this and I frankly don't care. I'm going to buy the peanuts from the person on the street all day long, twice on Sunday, because I don't want to spend $19 for peanuts inside the stadium. Okay. But why am I seeing that now? And I didn't see that 10 years ago or in 2001 when we went to the World Series the last time. I didn't see that then.
Particularly in our community?
Specifically right here.
Because I remember traveling to California and seeing the street vendors for sure, selling the snorting hot dogs. But even I went to Coldplay, the concert in the Rose Bowl,
right,
about a month and a half ago. Oh. And yeah, I'm talking hundreds of Sonoran hot dog stands coming out of that stadium because the way that stadium sits in the neighborhood, it's ridiculously stupid how they park you and whatever else. And so you got a good hike. And and admittedly, by the mile hike, I was hungry, and we had a 1 in the morning Sonoran hot dog. Yeah, that was cooking up. Yeah, and they had hundreds there. And I did go to a Diamondbacks playoff game, and you're right, I didn't notice them as much before, and they are heavy now. I don't know what that's attributed to.
Well, I mean,
people trying to grind. I don't know. People
side hustles, jobs. Whatnot. I don't know. Other than I think the lines for the jobs right now are longer than they used to be. That makes sense to me. Hard to catch on to with an outfit that does whatever type of work because there's a lot more competition. I don't know.
Then why is our cost of living so high then if we've got enough labor that would this is another totally different off-topic question, but if the job lines are so long and we've got all this immigrant labor that is trying to side hustle, that probably means that their costs of their contract, their subcontracting to a general should be pretty low. I don't know if that's the general still being selfish.
I feel like there was 10 dudes to a room 20 seconds ago, and there still are, but they're paying 3 times as much as they were 2 years ago. You can't rent an apartment for under whatever it is. You can't. I mean, now all of a sudden, they've always been very frugal. By they meaning the immigrants have always been very frugal about they've got a family or 2 residing or 3. If they're just a bunch of fellas that are here working, it's not uncommon to have multiple in an apartment that's small, sleeping on the floor. The complaints are like zero. They fix their faucet if it breaks. They usually keep a pretty clean outfit because they're not looking for eyeballs.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like, all right, it's high time to get realistic with the numbers.
Yeah, that's the biggest.
And frankly, I'm not sure that a number would work.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that I don't have. Yeah, I haven't researched enough to. But there's so many think tanks out there that could go through population growth and inflation and job market and whatever else that they need to do and pick a number. And I guarantee that number is not 65,000.
Right.
You're probably into the hundreds of thousands at this point. Just tripling it or quadrupling it would still probably be low, but those jobs would fill. And again, so people understand, when you go through and you process somebody to come in and do foreign labor, it's not that you just circumvent any recruiting of U.S. citizens or residents that are already here looking for jobs. In fact, you have to place an ad with the state workforce agency and where you are. You have to place Sunday newspaper ads. You have to advertise on monster.com.
Like incorporating.
Anytime, I mean, you have to recruit for the job as if you were recruiting for an open job to anybody.
Right.
And so it's not that they are just targeting immigrant labor, but they usually, when people come to me, it's, hey, I've done this. I've advertised a job for 4 months. I've got, Jose's brother that's willing to come in and nobody's applied for this job. Can I bring him in?
And they're like, yeah.
Yeah. And so, or it's a company that is so heavily labor intense in a certain season, like your landscaping or your construction companies, that again, can't find enough people to keep up with their work. And so they bring them in. But there's a process that goes through. And I think people are misunderstanding that they say, well, they're taking jobs. Well, the jobs were advertised for. They were not.
Right. They weren't picked up by anybody that can. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I really feel, and I'm going to wrap it up on this and then let you blow it up. You put a number on it, you're dead on arrival.
Sure.
So that's my period into story thoughts. So no, we're not going to put, because it sure sounds like amnesty, but no, here are our terms. Here are our nation's terms. Okay, here, Texas, they say God bless Texas, and I'm kind of, no. Anyway, they're going to have to chill out or they're going to keep dealing with what we're dealing with now. So get your boots on, Texas, and let's get ready. These are our terms. No numbers, no nothing. You pay this, you get this, you pay taxes at this rate. You're here, you renew it. If you want to just continue to do that cycle until you're no longer, fine. If you want this other avenue wherein you would like residency, okay, here's that avenue. Yeah, you're going to have to learn English. Yeah, you're going to have to boom, boom, boom. Here are our terms. Mm-hmm. And you're going to pay for it.
And I think the last program that was proposed, the DAPA program, it had, or maybe it was one of the Dreamer programs that had a permanent solution to it. The process was like 8 to 14 years to actually get a green card. Like you had to prove yourself for more than a decade of paying taxes and keeping yourself out of trouble. And I had zero problem, and neither did any, there was some pro-immigrant rights organizations that were like, oh, that's too stringent and we just need to give them stuff. And look, there's talking heads on both sides and they're both way too extreme in their views. But on the ground floor of my clients, who cares? Give me 8 years. I don't care. I'll keep my nose clean. And if I don't, then you have the right to kick me out. Right. I'll own it. Yeah. And so those types of programs, I don't think are going to, if we can just get the political side out of it, I think there's solutions. Yeah. But what you do is you propose that, and what's going to happen is somebody's going to come into a CNN interview and say, well, this is essentially amnesty. Right. And they use that trigger word, and everybody doesn't understand what amnesty means, but they hear the word and they think, that if I'm a conservative, that's a bad word. Right. Amnesty is a bad word. Now, I don't even know why that word is interpreted into every pro-immigration reform that we do that causes somebody to get a work permit or an authorization. Right. Because the opposite of that, and the argument is no, they didn't do it the legal way, so don't benefit them. Right. Again, get it. I get it. You don't reward somebody for doing something that
But
you
we have a hole in the pants.
But it's here.
Yeah, we have the problem.
So like I'm dealing with a discipline issue on my basketball team right now, and I had two choices. I could let the kid basically be suspended for the rest of the year and not come to practices and whatever else. But the damage was already done. He's gonna have suspensions in games, but I felt like practicing and learning how to improve from this and be a better teammate in the future is going to benefit him. And so he's the team, and hopefully it'll be a life lesson for him for the future. And so practice, get better.
Yeah.
Like there's consequences for the actions. And so if it's a fine, if it's an 8-year program of paying taxes, and maybe it's extra taxes, maybe you're in a tax bracket that's above and beyond.
Right.
Again, I think there's things that they will sacrifice and do, and you'll have very few complaints. You might have it on the very extreme sides of things, but in order to compromise, you got to compromise. And I think that, it could be $5,000, it could be $6,000, it could be extra taxes, it could be a long process to get it, but give me some way to be able to work, show myself, show my face to my employer.
Here are my terms.
Yeah.
Period. Here are our terms. The United States of America, here are our terms. Boom. Present them, and if you don't do that, then now it's game on. It's our PIO sweep days
now it's
all over again.
Enforcement.
Yeah, it's enforcement, amp up enforcement on that one, because we have a very liberal, let's call it, liberally construed boom. These are our terms. You live by the terms. You pay the piper by the terms. The terms are reasonable terms, but then all of a sudden we turn a problem into we turn a deficit into a profit. Like it goes from a negative to a positive.
And obviously I think there should be a monetary penalty of some sort. And what you end up doing is if you put a monetary penalty, you also self-fund the organizations that are going to process these applications.
So so you
don't have budgetary concerns.
Right.
You don't have to write it into some kind of.
It's paying for itself.
Absolutely.
And then not only that, but it's also paying for the enforcement. And so that's something that we don't pay enough attention to as citizenry. It's like, oh yeah, let's give teachers more money. Let's give teachers more money. That sounds so good. It sounds like such a good idea. Let's go red for ed. I didn't vote go red for ed. I'll let everybody know right now. Why? Because the kid the young lady that's teaching my kids in school isn't going to get a significant, if at all, a raise. The damn administration they're getting the raise. So they can go to hell until that actually ends up in the pocket of the teacher. So let's not politicize this thing, like you said earlier in this one. Let's not politicize this. Here are our terms. Get the amnesty word out of your head. Get that this is out of your head. Get that's out of your head. These are our terms. And this is what you get under these terms. And these are the abilities, and this is what it costs.
And look,
so it self-funds.
Immigration's a tough issue, and I heard an interview from I don't know what senator it was, and they were like, "Hey, how come we haven't done immigration reform?" And we're working on it, but you don't understand. It's very, very difficult. Well, so is everything when you have to compromise, right? And unfortunately, I don't know where we got such a recent divide on this. I don't know again if it was. You've got a voting block of Hispanic Latinos that have been here for a long time, or immigrant communities in general that have now, after 200.5 years, have got they learned how to be American. They learned how to speak their mind. They learned how to use freedom of speech. And so you have maybe a little bit more on the pro-immigrant side, complaining, but you also have a extreme conservative branch that hears immigration. And again, their biggest thing is don't reward somebody that's done something wrong,
which I understand, but it goes back to your basketball. It goes back to your basketball player. Goes back to him. Okay, the damage is done. Now what do we do with this? Yeah. What's the best fit for this situation?
And you definitely want to curb and make sure that this is not motivating for more people to come. So you put a deadline to it, or you put, hey, you had to have been here for 4 or 5 years. Right. There's always going to be people that are not going to be happy about it. Maybe the guy that's only been here 6 months is not happy about it.
Sure.
Or the people that wanted to come are not happy about it.
Sure.
Your processes can still exist that what we've had before. You can still immigrate family members. That doesn't need to change. That's always a way of life, and it's been that way for a long time. But yes, dealing with what's here already is not being done. It's being continually ignored. And it's just, a talking point every political cycle and nothing gets done. And that's the frustrating part for me is that I don't think the solutions have to be, you just have to have somebody that is willing to listen and compromise on both sides.
On both sides. It's got to happen on both sides. Every few weeks, I want to talk about this one. I want to drill down on this because I do think it's doable. Sure. I do think it's absolutely not 100%.
Yeah, no solution. And it never
look,
is.
It's like
no
a surgery. It's like a surgery.
Perfect.
You have surgery. You're usually not better off in the long run after you have surgery, but you're better than you were. That's what we're looking to get.
Yeah.
And we can keep rehabbing afterward. I mean, that's the name of the game, right? And so that's the way I want to roll.
Yeah. And we're at a point now that we keep passing the buck down to the next administration or the next Congress. And now, like you said, we were at 11 million people maybe when President Obama was talking about immigration reform. And now we're
maybe
at
11,
20 million.
Right.
So
easy.